I'm not that familiar with these issues that we've talked about right now. I have been chastised because of my criticism of Israel or of Israel government's position and Israel military position vis-a-vis the Palestinians. And the way the criticism has gone is really ridiculous because I understand that the Jewish Chronicle a couple of months ago received about 40 contacts from people who were challenging whether or not I'm Jewish and whether I'm a Holocaust survivor.
Right. Well, we know that you're Jewish. We know that you're a Holocaust survivor, and we'll come back to this issue in a moment, but let's check out some examples of what's happened to others who criticize Israel.
Israel's embassy in Dublin sacked press officer Dr. Noreen O'Carroll in July 2002 when she condemned the Israeli Air Force for bombing the Gaza Strip in a letter to Irish newspapers. Malcolm Evans, an award-winning cartoonist, was sacked by the New Zealand Herald newspaper after drawing cartoons criticising the Israeli government's treatment of the Palestinian people, including one that depicted the word apartheid, a Star of David forming the letter A. Jenny Tong, MP, was sacked by Liberal Democrat leader Charles Kennedy following her remarks about Palestinian suicide bombers, in which she said she would consider becoming one if she were Palestinian. Robert Malley, one of Barack Obama's Middle East advisors, was sacked after the pro-Israeli lobby expressed outrage he had held meetings with Hamas. The would-be US president severed all links with him within 48 hours of the news. Professor of Physics Dennis Rancourt was dismissed by the University of Ottawa on March 31, 2009, he says, for his criticism of Israel. United Nations officials said criticism of Israel had been dropped from a draft being prepared for a World Racism meeting. Initial draft resolutions for the United Nations Durban II summit branded Israel as an occupying state that carries out racist policies. Afif Safir, one of Palestine's most distinguished diplomats and the former ambassador to Britain and America, was sacked from his diplomatic post in Russia after a complaint to President Mahmoud Abbas from Israel that he had attended a pro-Hamas rally in Moscow. Dayan Jayatalika, Sri Lanka's United Nations representative, was sacked shortly after his speech at the UN Human Rights Council special session on Gaza, in which he issued a strongly worded statement that condemned the atrocities committed on the people of Gaza by Israel. Baroness Jenny Tong was sacked from her political party's front benches for anti-Israeli comments. The Liberal Democrat House spokeswoman had made comments to the Jewish Chronicle about Israel's role in human organ trafficking from the quake-stricken Haiti. Sheikh Ikram Sabri, the Mufti of Jerusalem, says he was fired by Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas for criticising Israel by claiming the Zionist state did not want peace.
So, Hedy, would you say that those sackings were justified? You felt criticism or attacks on yourself for criticising Israel?
And, you know, I don't know why one isn't allowed to criticize Israel. One is allowed to criticize here in England. You can criticize people in Parliament here. In the United States, I know there's criticism, lots of criticism, especially since President Obama has taken the helm. And that's okay. But when you criticize Israel, if you're Christian, you're anti-Semitic. If you're Jewish, you're anti-Semitic, and you're a self-hating Jew, you're a traitor, all kinds of, and as I just mentioned earlier, I mean, it's been questioned whether or not I'm a Holocaust survivor. And you know, because I don't have a number on my arm, fortunately.
Your parents perished in Auschwitz.
That's right.
And you were one of 10,000 Jewish children which escaped to Britain?
Right.
Before the war?
In the 9 months preceding World War II, England took in almost 10,000, mostly Jewish children, on something called the Kindertransport, or children's transport. And I was one of those fortunate children.
One of the lucky ones. Jeffrey, why would Hedy be exposed to such criticism and questioning her Jewishness, her background, because she is critical of Israel?
I've recently been reading Anthony Julius's monumental history of anti-Semitism in England. And that book has its strengths and its weaknesses. But one of its strengths is that it demonstrates very clearly that anti-Semitism, meaning irrational hatred of Jews, and anti-Zionism, in the sense of irrational hatred of the Jewish state, are garments cut from the same cloth. I think that's one of the central strengths of Anthony Julius's book. So I think it's a knee-jerk reaction by many Jews. No, I'm one of the survivors in a sense. I wouldn't be here had it not been for the English Channel. I think there is a tendency to question those who question the legitimacy of the Jewish state. And I draw a distinction, Yvonne, myself, between criticising individual acts of individual governments of the State of Israel. If you go to Israel, that goes on all the time. They're disagreeing all the time. There's a vigorous debate going on. Interestingly, there's a vigorous debate going on about many issues in Israel which Jews in the diaspora are very unhappy about entering. That the debate can take place in Israel, but outside Israel, many Jews feel very uncomfortable about discussing these questions, certainly in a non-Jewish setting.
But how could somebody like Hedy Epstein be called anti-Semitic? She's certainly, it would be fair to say, anti-Zionist.
Well, I think it would be ridiculous to call Hedy anti-Semitic. She might be an anti-Zionist. I don't know her well enough to make a judgment on this. Of course, there was a time when anti-Zionism was very fashionable amongst Jews, certainly Jews in this country. It was very fashionable. That, however, Yvonne, was before the Holocaust. And I think I go back to the point I made. Many Jews in the diaspora feel extremely uncomfortable about having in public or semi-private situations the sorts of debates which are everyday fare in the State of Israel.
This is a very, very important point. Within Israel, there is a debate between left and right. Around 60% of the people would be right now. About 40% of the people, especially in Tel Aviv, would be left, and there will be a debate. When you get out of Israel, the expectation is that within the tribe, to put it in this way, there will be an unconditional support. And therefore, if there are voices there who are not necessarily pro-Israeli, then there might be some opposition to what they say. Again, the expectation is that within the tribe, in the UK, in Europe perhaps, especially in America, there will be an unconditional support to Israel.
You keep it within the family. You keep it within the family.